Here's Brody Brazil.
Before I get too deep into this video, I just want to set some perspective here. If you grew up in the 80s and 90s like I did, thinking about the year 2025 felt like forever in the future. Like it would never actually come around, and we'll get there when we get there. But 2025 felt way off in the distance. Here we are. It's 2025. And so when I talk about Major League Baseball and 5 predictions for the 2035 season, at this point, it feels like forever away. Like we'll get there eventually, but it's going to be some time. 10 years are going to happen just like that. You watch. It's just the nature of life. And so as much as these feel like predictions for way down the road, 2035, and yeah, robotic baseball player, I know some of you hate that I used AI there to make that, but anyway, I digress. The point is, it's going to happen sooner than later, and so I feel like these 5 predictions are not as far off, and they're also not as crazy as you might expect as I'm making them here in 2025. Prediction number 1, by 2035, Major League Baseball will have a unified streaming package for its fans and customers. And essentially, the simple way to think about it is like this. Right now, the broadcast is the primary way that fans are watching games, and streaming is an option. It's going to flip-flop. Streaming is going to be the primary way, and broadcast will be the option that still exists but is fading away, and some teams will do away with it. Eventually, it'll all go away, but for right now, in 10 years down the road, it will still exist just as the secondary option, not the primary option. There will be alt casts for every popular game and team. I'm not saying every broadcast or streaming package, streaming package is going to have this, but alt casts are not difficult or expensive to do. What am I talking about with an alt cast? It's a secondary or even tertiary version. You could do a second or third or fourth version of the broadcast with different announcers, a different treatment. You're basically taking the same camera feeds. You're only piping in different audio channels, maybe some cutaway shots of these different announcers. And my point is, you could do the game in many multiple languages. You could have different announcer styles. You could have traditional play-by-play on the main stream, and then you could have on a secondary stream more of like a casual lounge theme. It's kind of like a podcast while the baseball game or the football game is going on, or the basketball or hockey game is going on. So I do think that alt casts, and they can't really exist on traditional and typical linear platforms right now. There's just not enough channels. But with streaming, it is so easy to do this. Again, if it's easy and it's not that expensive, and it might bring in more of an audience. Like, for example, sometimes people are going to watch the game. I don't think small games, and that's why I said popular games and teams, small audiences, I don't think you want to segment them too much. But larger audiences, whether it's a big game or a popular team, you can definitely segment that audience up, and I think it might grow it more because the fans are getting exactly what they want. And with all of this, right, streaming, and they can still geofence whatever they want. If they really want or need to have regional viewing restrictions, they can easily do that with streaming. In fact, you can do that easier with streaming than you can on broadcast. But the blackouts will be long gone, right? If I subscribe to this streaming package for my team or my division or the entire league, whatever it is, blackouts don't exist. If I'm watching at home, no problem, on the phone or on my Apple TV device or my streaming device connected to the TV, that's no problem. Or if I'm on vacation on the other side of the world, if I'm on an island, if I'm on top of a mountain, it doesn't matter. Blackouts are long gone. If you've paid, that's all that really matters. And so there would be no more blackouts as part of this unified streaming package. That's my number 1 prediction. By the way, these are in no specific order. I've made a video about this one before, and I do believe that in the next 10 years, there will not be an American and National League for Major League Baseball. They will be replaced by an East and West, and I'll say conference here, but everybody does conference, right? So maybe they'll call it something, an East this and a West that. But they'll have East and West divisions, and conferences, but then they'll still have divisions within those conferences. Does that make sense? It'll be more traditional like every other sport and how they do it. East and West, and then divisions among that East and West. And why they'll do this, I think, is for a couple different reasons. It'll assure that the playoffs and the World Series are geographically spread. Now think about the World Series of 2024. I mean, it was Major League Baseball's dream. The New York Yankees, the number 1 media market, the biggest probably fan base, that they could possibly get, and the number 2 team in market they could possibly get in the Los Angeles Dodgers. The only thing that baseball didn't get was a 7-game series so they could maximize every last penny and eyeball out of those ratings. But if you do it like this, I mean, you're geographically assured that, hey, it's East and West in terms of, round 1, round 2, if it's still a divisional series, and a championship series, and then a World Series, and maybe there's some wild card stuff. Like, they'd have to reformat the entire postseason, but it basically means there's a bracket out East and there's a bracket out West, so you are going to get East versus West in ultimately a World Series, and maybe that generates more national attention. Let's be honest. If it's Phillies, Yankees in the World Series, how many people out West? I mean, if you're a baseball fan, you're watching, but does it entice the West Coast viewer? Same thing if it were all out West. Let's say it was, I don't know, I'll make this one up, Padres Mariners in the World Series, American National League. Is somebody out East really staying up late to watch that, making sure that they're invested in the series? This guarantees that the interest is there. Now, do I agree with this? Not necessarily. I don't need this to happen, but I think it will happen. I also feel like in terms of the regular season, we've talked a lot about the playoffs, in the regular season, it could reduce travel if you do things more geographically. Like, let's say the Padres are going to visit some of the American League teams like Seattle, right? They're not having to go across the map as constantly as they do now. They would reformat the schedule. They would obviously realign the divisions and everything, but all of this could reduce travel. It could also increase, in my opinion, a good part about this, increase regional rivalry. Right? And there is something to be said about having a fan rivalry between your team and other teams, and it just does kind of seem to hit more close to home when your opponent is literally close to home. So I do feel like that would be a bonus of making it based on geography versus an American and National League. I don't think there's going to be a salary cap by 2035, if ever, and we might be several CBAs, collective bargaining agreements, down the road by the time we get to 2035. But I do think there will be a salary floor. And the separation is only going to continue to grow here in these next couple of years, but that's what's going to magnify the problem. That's what's going to identify what's going on here. They're never going to say, hey, we want to put a limit on how much we can spend on players. I do think at some point owners are going to bark about that, but I think the top owners, the most powerful ones, are going to say, hey, wait a second. We don't need a cap where we're at. We need a floor where you're at because you're lagging behind. Again, nobody, I don't think, will ever agree or want to a salary cap, but I do think the floor will be introduced as a requirement of a couple different things. Like there'd be a hard floor. You have to spend this much if you want to be a functional team. But then maybe you have to spend that plus a little bit more if you want to get revenue sharing, right? So that the luxury tax, people don't understand, there is a salary cap right now in baseball. It's called the luxury tax. It is a soft cap. It's not a hard cap like the National Hockey League where there's no going above it. It's a soft cap. You can go above it, but you're heavily penalized in multiple different ways. And so it would be a hard floor, but also maybe some soft floor options. I think that's what's going to happen in terms of trying to make baseball have more parity. It's not so much stopping the top limit. It's going to be pushing the bottom up closer to the top and forcing teams to not be able to spend $40, $50, $60 million on their team while others are spending $300 plus per season on their team. I do think a salary floor is going to exist. I also think Major League Baseball is going to expand by 2 teams at least by 2035. And you know what? They had talked about 2028 and 29. I think these 2 teams might start playing right before 2035. 31, 32, 33, 34, you name it. But I'm assuming here, and I used ATH, ATH to the Athletics, wherever they're playing, I'll assume that they're settled by 2035, hopefully, somewhere. Tampa Bay, they've got some uncertainty right now. The White Sox have some rumors and speculation. Kansas City didn't get the money for a new stadium that they were asking for. I'm going to assume that all of them and everybody else who's got a stadium situation discrepancy issue, everybody's resolved, right? But there may be new teams that pop up in the old relocation threat, like the Arizona Diamondbacks. And I think they're recently settling things out with a new share of the tax. Anyway, my point is everybody's settled. Baseball is going to expand up to 32 teams, which evenly fits, going back to that realignment thing I was talking about, going back to East versus West instead of American and National League. Now 32 fits perfectly, right? You can figure out where to draw the line. 16 out East, 16 out West, and now you've got all your divisions realigned. And if you do this at the right time, you can introduce these two new teams the same year that you take away the leagues and go East and West. So you're not doing one by one reformatting. You're doing everything all at once. You expand by two. You take away the American and National League. You reformat everything in 1 year. And it's a lot less painful to do that all at once instead of slowly in a process. Why would baseball want to do this? Well, it's not because they just like the number 32. It's not because they like even numbers. It's because they like expansion fees. And if they wait, if it was a $2 billion expansion fee by 2033, what do you think it's going to be? $5 billion times 2. $10 billion equally split among the existing 30 or 31 teams by then. And they're going to love that. And I don't know where these two cities are going to be. Portland, maybe, Orlando. Nashville seems like it's out of the mix. Their mayor says they're tapped out of funding and spending, and rightfully so, because they're helping the Titans build a $2.2 billion stadium and paying for a lot of it. Las Vegas, I put that in there because I'm not so sure the A's eventually in there. There's been a lot of back and forth and a lot of positivity shared around Sacramento alone. And you know what? If Sacramento doesn't work, Las Vegas is only good for $380 million of public funding. Utah, right now, is good for $900 million of public funding. They've got a site anyway. Las Vegas could potentially be an expansion city if the Athletics don't eventually make it there. Okay, prediction number 5 here. 5 unicorns by 2035. What do I mean by that? Shohei Ohtani right now is doing something amazing, doing something that, I don't know, even Babe Ruth did, but maybe not up to Babe Ruth standards. But Ohtani's got a lot of years of pitching and hitting and still left, right, to match Babe Ruth. My point is, Ohtani is a model of what kids are aiming to become, that dual threat. Somebody who can hit, somebody who can pitch. By the way, I'm also going to make a video pretty soon that Ohtani, I don't think he should pitch in 2025. I really don't. Unless the Dodgers absolutely need it from him, I don't think they should do that. But the best players, who are always the best athletes in baseball, and they're always the ones that can pitch and probably play shortstop and probably hit cleanup for you. I don't think that coaches and teams and college teams, I don't think they're going to say, hey, it's time for the fork in the road. You need to decide, are you going to be a pitcher or are you going to be a position player? Are you going to hit or are you going to pitch? What are you going to do? I think that pipeline is actually going to influence players to do both if they're good at it, if they're capable of it. And so I'm just picking out the number 5. Like there's not going to be 0 after Ohtani, but there's also not going to be 50 of these players. I think there will be 5 players in 2035 across the league that both pitch and hit and play a position on a regular basis. Because I feel like teams are also going to realize, wait, if we've got a player who's doing 2 things for us at once, the value of that player's contract is so much more to us. Even a decent pitcher and hitter combo is going to be valued that much more by the team because they can give you just a little bit more. So again, I don't think this is going to go crazy, but I think what Ohtani's doing is going to lay the groundwork for more of that unicorn situation, the pitcher and hitter in baseball, by 2035. We'll see where this goes. And maybe this video here on YouTube, of course, it'll still be up and able to be watched by 2035. So you can go back on this 10 years from now and say, hey, look how young that guy looks. Remember that home studio he used to have? Maybe he still has it. Maybe I'm still doing this here. But 2035 feels like a long ways away. I guarantee you, you watch how life goes, it will not be. 2015 feels like just yesterday. That's the end of this video. Thumbs up down below. Greatly helps me, this video, this channel. Also, don't forget to subscribe. I would love to see you back here next time.